Arch Warhammer's recent Rome 2 videos demonstrate how he's probably the worst type of YouTuber on the website. The type of YouTuber with a large subscriber count who feels absolutely no desire to fact check anything he says before pumping out a video. He has 162,000 subscribers. If someone with that many subscribers decided to slander someone, their fanbase could actually cause a considerable amount of grief. Considering this guy is one of those YouTubers who drank the anti-SJW Kool-Aid, this is ironic since these types of people usually complain about how SJWs go after people's jobs and try to get them fired. For those not in the know, the recent Rome 2 controversy is over there being female generals in Rome 2. Arch is going to claim it isn't, but I'll explain why he's wrong later. The other factor is a CA community manager whose username is CA Ella, or at least I think she's a community manager. She locked a single thread that was being filled with toxic behavior and told them that if they were bothered by women being in the game, they should either mod them out or just stop playing. This is literally part of a community manager's job, but for some reason in this one instance, Arch Warhammer is going to act like this is enough of a problem to try to utilize his high subscriber count to review bomb the game. I'll try to address as many claims as I can sequentially, and then I'll show a clip of me trying to recruit female generals in-game to show that Arch has no idea what he's talking about. Arch's first claim in his most recent video is that the controversy is recent despite the patch having gone up in March. This is true, but Arch downplays the reason why. He claims it was because CA Ella locked the thread. At the 2:30 timestamp in his most recent video, he claims that her post was a pinned post. It wasn't. It was her last post in a locked thread. It wasn't a message to the entire community. She was responding to the people who she had to lock the thread because of. Arch is trying to claim that this was an official statement that was broadcasted to the entire community. It wasn't. Now, I think I can link two things to the review bombing. The review bombing started after Arch Warhammer's video went up. He even posted about it on Twitter as if to congratulate himself for it. But there is one other thing he deliberately ignores. A Daily Stomer article claiming that the video game is attempting to replace white soldiers with women and black soldiers. For those not in the know, the Daily Stomer is a Nazi website. I think Arch is aware of the article because when he tried to show a screen cap of the game's prevalent female generals, he used a cropped version of the screen cap from the Daily Stomer rather than the original screen cap which was posted in the thread itself. Speaking of the screen cap, I don't think Arch knows much about how generals are recruited in the game. I'll go over that more in the clip I'll play later, but look at the arrows to the sides of the characters' faces. Those are scroll buttons. If you click them, it cycles through the available generals, and given that the screen cap shows that the player has 7 armies, this must be quite late into the campaign. So likely these female generals are just 5 of a much larger pool of generals that the player could recruit. All the rest of the available generals could be male. Also, in the original uncropped screen cap, you can actually see a male general in the bottom left of the screen. In Arch's original video on the subject, he said you could end up in a situation where literally all the available generals you can recruit are women. This seems to suggest he doesn't know that you can scroll through the list of generals. This is just Arch being deliberately dishonest or maliciously ignorant for the sake of pushing an anti-SJW narrative. That said, I suppose you could end up in a situation where you are forced to use female generals, but it would require you to deliberately kill off all your male generals to do it. Of course, at that point, you've gone out of your way to create a situation to complain about. Later in the video, he claims that female generals were added for political reasons. There is absolutely no way Arch could know whether or not this is true. He states that the rates of their occurrence being higher than in reality is evidence, but it really isn't. There could be a number of reasons for that, which Arch just rejects. It could be that since Kush was added with female generals for historical reasons, the developers decided to add them to the other nations too because they thought it would be a neat idea. The occurrence rate is high because what is the point of adding a feature that nobody is even going to see? I think the idea that the game company would invest man-hours into developing a feature just to further a political agenda and possibly cause controversy that could hurt their sales is a very big claim to make without evidence. Thankfully, Arch Warhammer in his most recent video clears up a bit of information he spread about the spawn rates, although he shouldn't have spread that misinformation to begin with. He should have researched what he was talking about. He pointed out that only one faction has a 50% chance of getting female generals, and that's Kush, which has a historical reason for that. The rest of the video is basically just Arch mocking articles for not calling out CA Ella, and ignoring that her comment was posted in a thread filled with toxic behavior that had to be closed. You know, basically just doing her job. He then goes on to do the whole anti-SJW spiel of complaining about how game companies are pandering to SJWs who don't even play the games and yada yada yada. We've all heard it before. Even though SJWs barely even exist, despite what people like Arch and Sargon would have you to believe. We can look at the recent Doom controversy for evidence of why you keep hearing about SJWs despite them not being a significant group of people. You know, the controversy surrounding a few Twitter posts that had to be searched for and barely had any likes or retweets. Basically a manufactured controversy considering everyone from Sargon to No Bullshit decided to make a video about it. Of course, never tell these anti-SJW people that SJWs aren't a really big deal, because they have to have this victim narrative that SJWs are trying to silence everybody or whatever, which is ironic since victim narratives are something they attribute to SJWs themselves. One thing Arch Warhammer is correct about is that CA Ella tried to draw a distinction between the terms authentic and accurate. If that's the only thing you have a point over, though, maybe this is a non-issue. Also, within context, you can kind of guess what she was saying. The game is largely about the player attempting to change history, so it can't be 100% accurate. But CAV at least tried to keep the game having as much of a feel of the time period as possible, making exceptions for fun or adding something cool. Anyway, I'll move on to a clip of me trying to recruit female generals in-game and explaining why the controversy over female units is overblown. Okay, let's look at how generals are recruited in this game, because Arch Warhammer didn't really seem to understand this. He claimed that there's like a 50% female general rate for all the factions or something. Like Rome and Greece can't even get female generals. I think some of the other factions can't either. I'm playing as one of the ones that can get female generals, and you're going to see how he's being a little bit dishonest about it. So this is the screen from where you recruit generals. Now, the first 5 are all male. I think the spawn rate for female generals is something like 10%. Which is a little bit high, but if you put it at anything below that, you might never see female generals at all. Now, I actually can recruit female generals here, but the only reason why I can recruit them is because they're the wives of male generals that I already have. The way the game gives you generals is you have a small selection of random politicians that you can hire that you can also make generals, and then you have family members that you can make generals, and then you have people in other parties that you can make generals. You could very easily do an entire campaign where you never have to use female generals. In the screen cap art showed, that person must have had to have gone way out of their way to show a screen where nothing but female generals were available. Seems a little bit dishonest. Seems like he's trying to show this narrative that the SJWs are coming to enforce diversity here, and that's really not the case. If we go to the family tree, you can see that the only female generals I had available were the wives of the generals that I already had available. So this was one of the female generals I could recruit. And you notice that she has the same political options as the male one does. But if you're playing as Rome or Greece, they get a much shorter list of generals that they can recruit. Or they get a much shorter list of career promotion options, and they can't be recruited as generals. And instead they give like faction-wide buffs if you improve their, if you promote them. They get like influential woman as their first faction promotion option. Now, there is one faction that has a 50% female general recruitment rate, and that's the Kingdom of Kush. But there's a historical reason behind that, and they're the only faction that it's like that in. So why is this a big deal? It really shouldn't be a big deal. And even for the female units, let's see if I can bring them up here. Like, I'm playing as the nation with the most female units there is. And in order to get Spearwoman, for example, I have to build a very specific temple that prevents me from building the temple that I need to get the much better wooden as spears unit. So it's not like this is just a better option for me. It's not like the game's forcing me to recruit Spearwoman. In fact, it seems like a kind of a niche strategy. Now, this faction does have 2 female units that are kind of good, that you are kind of encouraged to
The
get.
overall happiness.
Let's get out of that. Let's see if I can bring them up. Maybe not here. Yeah, it's with the yeah, it's with the woodworking buildings. You can get Kimbri bowwomen who are pretty good, so you would be encouraged to use them.
Oh, Father, be praised! How can I help?
But there's another archery unit you can use if it really bothers you. And then there's the Hex Bearers, who they're a support unit. I guess you're kind of encouraged to use them because they have a neat ability to lower the morale of other enemies. They're kind of like the Screeching Women from Rome, from the first Rome game. But you could avoid recruiting them if you want. You're not really forced to recruit female units. I think there's one exception, in that the agents.
Come, sit, share my fire.
See, they have a male scout, but some factions have a female scout. And for the champion, this faction has a female champion called a Spear Maiden. So in that way, you are like if you want to use those agents, you do have to settle for using female agents, but I don't see why that's a big deal. Even if the game did force you to use female units, so what? Seems like a weird thing to complain about. Finally, I want to add that I do not believe that the controversy isn't about the women in the game. Remember Battlefield 5? People got so angry over how unrealistic it was to have women on the front lines, ignoring the fact that there were definitely less realistic elements in the trailer, like the prosthetic, which was a little too advanced for the time. For some reason, whenever women are put into a war game, people rage. Sure, the recent Rome 2 controversy only blew up after the Daily Stomer and Arch Warhammer misrepresented a CA employee's words, but people forget that the reason she locked the thread to begin with was because there were people who were upset about there being women in the game, and people were complaining about that ever since they were added. It only really blew up recently. I think the reason why the thread was locked in the first place kind of makes my point that yes, people do seem to be angry about there being women in the game. Anyway, like and subscribe if you liked my video. Follow me on Twitter too if you want, where I'm a lot more active. I'll also leave a link to my Discord in the description in case you want to join.